Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Northern Beaches Council Waste and Circular Economy Strategy webinar. We're just waiting for a few more people to join, and then we'll start the presentation presently. Thanks.
Okay, we might get started. I think the majority of attendees have now online. So good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Ward-Harvey, Executive Manager for Waste and Cleansing at Northern Beaches Council. I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and elders past, present and future. I recognise Aboriginal people as the original custodians of the Northern Beaches. And it's very important in what we're doing in the environmental space that we remember this. I'll just start with some housekeeping for this evening's presentation. Please be aware that this session is being recorded and will be shared via email with all registered attendees. Additionally, it will be available on the Council's website under the dedicated Have Your Say page for the draft strategy. Feel free during the course of the presentation to ask questions using the chat function throughout the presentation. We'll allocate 10 to 15 minutes towards the end of the session to respond to some of the questions. Any unanswered questions will receive a follow-up response via email. Where there are common themes not covered in our FAQ section, which is on our website, we'll post responses on the webinar platform. So we really hope that you find this session informative and gain a thorough understanding of our strategy and action plan for a cleaner, more sustainable future for the Northern Beaches. I'll start with the video we've put together to show you some of the impacts of waste and how we might be able to manage it.
On average, each of us on the Northern Beaches is creating 400 kilograms of waste each and every year. That's over 100,000 tonnes of household waste a year for the entire Northern Beaches community. It's time to pause and rethink what we're doing. The good news is your small decisions can make a big difference. Instead of buying new, rethink. Consider repairing or buying second-hand. Rethink, reduce and reuse to become part of the circular economy, which is good for the planet, for our community and for your pocket. Moving away from a take, make and dispose culture into a rethink, reduce and reuse future is a shared responsibility for Council and the community. There's a lot more to do and we want your help. Have your say on our waste and circular economy strategy today.
So that video demonstrates that there's lots of problems arising from waste, but there's also lots of opportunities, and that's a key theme for us through our strategy. And just briefly, at the end of that video, it referred to making submissions on the strategy. We'll provide some information at the end of the presentation about this and as to how you can make submissions. We've currently had 115 responses to our draft strategy to date, and we hope after tonight we'll have many more. So for some context, on the Northern Beaches, each person creates over 400 kilograms on average of household waste per year. And putting that together, it adds up to over 100,000 tonnes per year. So we each have a significant impact on waste in the region and also an opportunity to minimise that impact. Some of the key pressures that are leading to problems with waste are these set out here, these three items. So consumption patterns can lead to increase in the volumes of waste being generated, and also issues resulting from that. So there's in the consumer society in Australia, this can lead to a throwaway culture where we take, make and dispose of materials. And also naturally with economic and population growth, the more people that are around, the more waste generally gets created. And with economic growth as well, it's hard to contain the amount of waste that's generated. In the last few years, it's been highlighted in the media, and it does reflect the reality that there are some real problems and struggles with finding markets for recycled items. Offshore markets for waste have contracted, and some countries have banned the import of certain types of waste, and Australia has actually instigated waste export bans in certain areas. There's also limited demand for some recycled material. For example, soft plastics, with the REDcycle collapse, led to significant stockpiling. And the reason for this was there simply wasn't anywhere for it to go. There's also regulatory bans on potentially contaminated recycled material. So this is areas where a regulator, for example, the EPA or Commonwealth regulators, say that a recycled product is not fit for purpose, and it may actually contaminate the environment, and that's limited some markets for recycled material. There's also, in some areas, limited infrastructure. So in some key areas for problem-type waste, which we'll talk to later, there's not enough infrastructure to recycle the waste. That's the case for some food organics, electronic waste, plastics, and textiles. So there may be some opportunities offshore, and generally there'll be a couple of options in Australia, but not enough for the amount of waste that's created. Generally speaking as well, landfill space is running out in New South Wales for the Sydney region in particular, and there's limited time frames to be able to access landfills unless new landfills are built. And also there's quite a long distance from the Northern Beaches to a lot of intensive recycling facilities for large volumes of recycling. In terms of the impacts of waste, we also have three major areas. So there's pollution caused by waste litter and illegally dumped materials in the environment. There's also emissions. So this can be air emissions, but carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of managing, transporting and disposing of waste. And there's also the loss of resources. So disposing of waste, particularly to landfill, leads to the need to extract more resources from the environment to make new products. So that's not sustainable in the long term. And just briefly, I wanted to take you through the framework, the national framework for waste strategy, because that's influenced where we're coming from. So nationally, there's been quite a lot of attention in the last few years on waste. There hadn't been much before, but there is now, because they've seen some of the impacts of not having a national coordinated approach to waste. So there's now a national waste policy, which contains numerous actions, but some that are important include that waste export ban for waste plastic, paper, glass and tyres in certain categories, and also a number of targets to reduce waste and recycling. So one target is to reduce total waste generated in Australia by 10% per person by 2030, and to reach an 80% average resource recovery rate, so recycling rate, from all waste streams by 2030. In New South Wales, we also have a waste and sustainable materials strategy for 2041, which also contains quite a few similar targets, some very, very ambitious targets to combat litter, and also to combat emissions from waste, including food waste. And very importantly, it signals that the New South Wales government's intention to mandate separate collection of food and garden organic waste. So that means both garden waste and food waste needs to be collected separately by 2030 from households. Council also has its own strategies, one of which is the Environment and Climate Change Strategy, which includes some actions related to waste and some targets, but it isn't a comprehensive whole of waste and circular economy strategy. So that's the reason why we need this strategy going forward. And just finally, in terms of the framework, it's important to note that there are different responsibilities at different levels of government. There's certain things council can do better than the Commonwealth or New South Wales, and there's certain things that by law only the Commonwealth can do and New South Wales can do. And one of those is regulating product and packaging design, which is critical for reducing waste, which we'll talk to later. In terms of what we can do, we do have a domestic waste charge and can use that in order to do domestic improvements in household waste. And we've got a role to play in maintaining public amenity and also local land use planning. And importantly, influencing other governments and stakeholders and businesses to change their practices to improve waste outcomes. So the journey so far for the strategy, we've been working on the strategy in a number of different ways for quite some time, but really ramped it up at the end of last year. And we started off by having a random telephone survey of 600 residents across the Northern Beaches to gather their thoughts about waste and Council's household waste service. We then, and that was very informative, and I'll show some of the statistics on that shortly. And then we had 4 focused community workshops run by behavioural science experts to delve further into the findings of the survey. We've consulted key council community reference groups, so that's the Environment Strategic Reference Group, youth advisory groups to council, and some others. And we've liaised with key community and business stakeholders. We've also done a number of studies to sort of stress test some of the actions and strategies that we're adopting through the strategy to make sure that they work on the ground. And then we're in the final stage of the strategy drafting. So obviously we've drafted the strategy and it's out for consultation. And once we receive all the feedback, we'll then be taking that on board and adapting the strategy accordingly to finalise it in the first few months of next year. So in terms of some of the feedback from the survey, this screen shows some of that. So, and generally it was the community was very supportive of initiatives to reduce the impact of waste. So 86% support council rates being invested in trials and innovations to help recycle more. A significant number of the community support council facilitating community reuse and repair centres or hubs. 58% are concerned that items are not recycled. So that's a concerning figure for us. The survey was conducted just after the red cycle collapse for the plastic bags in supermarkets. So that's something we need to work on, and we need to ensure that any new initiative we put in place reinstates and reaffirms the community's confidence in recycling. There's very large support for council using recycled materials and infrastructure, for restricting the use of single-use takeaway packaging, and also for separating food waste for collection by council. So in response to the community feedback in all the methods I've spoken about, council's developed a vision for waste and litter and the circular economy. It's a sustainable and easy to use waste and litter service that supports a thriving local circular economy and protects our environment. And of course, now that we're getting into the content of the strategy, if you have any comments or suggestions in relation to any aspect, then please put that in your submission. So I've raised the issue of the circular economy a few times today. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with the concept, but I'll just clarify what that is in simple terms. So the circular economy is a concept that sort of emerged in the last decade in Europe, and now it's come to Australia in the last 5 years or so. And it's about promoting circularity of materials in the economy. So it's about keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible by circulating them through the productive economy, including by reusing materials, repairing them, sharing them, and recycling. And it's gaining a lot of traction across governments and businesses in maintaining materials in use for as long as possible. So we have 5 strategic directions for the strategy that are guiding all of the actions and the strategic approach in the strategy. The first one is eliminating waste. So, in a nutshell, this is about council advocating and supporting reducing waste in the household and also in businesses, because eliminating waste in the first place gets rid of all the problems down the track with waste, because it doesn't come into being. So it's really important that initiatives are in place for that, and I'll talk more to this shortly. Thriving local circular economy, that's where we've seen the strong community support for that, and that's where we want to focus a lot of effort to keep materials circulating in the Northern Beaches, reuse and repair as much as possible. The second direction is all about making our waste service easy to use. This is to maximise participation by the community in recycling in our systems, whether it's the curbside system or any other drop-off service we offer. It has to be easy, so it has to be reliable, accessible, flexible, and it has to be sustainable recycling options where we know there's an ongoing market for the material, a viable processor and buyers. The third direction is tackling priority waste. And for this, we're focusing on organics, meaning vegetation and food waste, and plastics. We've chosen to specifically focus on these wastes as they make up a significant proportion of household waste and can lead to pollution and downstream issues if not managed appropriately. They're also very important in the community's minds that we manage these appropriately, so we're calling them out as areas we need to specifically spend time and resources on. Direction 4 is green and clean environment. And this is about Northern Beaches having the cleanest public spaces in Sydney. So that's the vision, and that we minimise the environmental and climate change impact from managing waste. And direction 5 is council leading the way. And this is council sort of leading by example and doing all the things I've mentioned before in terms of reducing and reusing, etc., in our operations, but also working in the built environment to minimise waste, to promote circular building and reuse and repair, and also in the local planning framework. So out of those directions, we have some key actions that I wanted to just provide a summary of for you this evening. The first one is food organics. So, as I mentioned before, the New South Wales government has committed to mandate the separate collection of food and garden organic waste for each household by 2030 in its waste and sustainable materials strategy. Now, as you know, Northern Beaches already separately collects garden waste and offers free worm farmed compost bins after participating in a composting course. However, we acknowledge that food waste recycling can help reduce emissions and reduce landfill, and so it's quite important that it isn't going to waste. There are, however, some challenges with the supply chain that we need to make sure we address in it as we roll out any food waste system. We've got to ensure that there's a high quality material that recyclers actually want and can use for a product that will actually sell, to avoid anything being stockpiled or put into landfill. We also know that there are some limited markets for the recycled product right now, so there's a fair bit of product development that needs to be done in the industry over the next few years to ensure that there's ongoing sustainable sustainable organics markets that will ensure that we can continue to provide this service. We want to design a scheme that works and is sustainable for our community. So in terms of the approach and the strategy, there's a couple of different aspects of it. We want it to be a holistic approach. So it's not just about collection, it's also about helping people at home. So initiatives to reduce food waste generated in the home, so better meal planning and things like that, donating excess food, and also managing organic waste and home composting where it's feasible. But the collection is something that we intend to put out in the strategy that we're going to adopt a staged approach to food waste collection with initial testing of different collection processing systems in a targeted amount of households, and then scale that up afterwards. Plastics. So plastics, there's obviously been a lot in the media about plastic recycling and disposal in the last few years, and it is problematic to recycle. So we can't recycle our way out of the problems we have with plastics at the moment. But what we want to do is work on sustainable solutions for the Northern Beaches community and work with the federal government and state government on ways to do this. There's already plastic bans that have been implemented by the New South Wales and other governments, and they're looking at banning further plastics. However, the vast volume of plastics still remain out there, and we need to be looking at how do we ensure that is sustainable use and that it's only being used where necessary, and also that it's genuinely recyclable. Because if it's not genuinely recyclable or no recyclers want it, then it's going to end up in landfill or in the natural environment and leading to pollution. So what we're proposing to do is continue our work, and we've already done a fair bit in this space, on advocacy for phasing out single-use and unrecyclable plastics with the Commonwealth and state government. Identify opportunities to support local businesses to use alternatives to single-use plastics. And that can include things like reusable containers or other reusable schemes, and there's lots of new schemes coming out in that respect, and council's willing to work with businesses on that. And still trial plastic recycling programs as long as there are markets for recycled products and there is producer responsibility. So those that are generating the plastics need to actually assist us in those programs so that they actually own the issue. The Circular Economy Hub. So I spoke previously about this in terms of the community desire to have locations for repair and reuse. And we saw that in our survey that's extremely popular with the community. We're currently actually investigating different models which will suit the Northern Beaches. This could range from online networks to pop-up hubs, repair cafes, or ongoing permanent physical locations. And we're going to be stress testing those as well to see what might work for the Northern Beaches. And we will be doing things with the community over the coming year to trial different methods of this so that we can actually see what's popular and what's not. And that will help us develop a long-term approach. The kind of material that would be part of this could include reusable furniture, electronics, textiles, and other items that might be disposed of in council's curbside bulky goods collections. And we're looking at possibilities to look at also if there's a drop-off location for things like paints, batteries and chemicals on a more permanent basis, but we need to assess the feasibility of that. So it's important also that these kind of opportunities can develop social connectivity and community engagement. So it can encourage repair networks with people with similar interests. And we've already seen that in things like men's sheds and the like. Employment opportunities for local repair and recycling, and we think that's there's lots of opportunity there. We're also looking into opportunities for sharing materials within the Northern Beaches. So, for example, local businesses, if somewhere like Brookvale or Mona Vale, where they're manufacturing items like cupboards or the like, and they have offcuts in the process which may be suitable to put into another process from another business nearby, and to develop a bit of a network in that respect to help that material being circulated around the Northern Beaches. And we will continue to advocate for stronger producer responsibility to enable more reuse and repair of products. So again, that's about putting the onus on manufacturers and other producers and brand owners to be responsible for design of products so that they can be used for as long as possible. The next one I want to talk about is eliminating waste and litter. So this is crucial. I've referred to it before, but if you can eliminate the waste at source, you're stopping it occurring in the first place and eliminating downstream issues with it. So what we want to do here is to ensure that we're a leading advocate and support our local community and business to reduce the amount of waste created in the Northern Beaches. In terms of litter, we're already working on a litter roadmap in conjunction with the New South Wales Environment Protection Authority to set out key actions to make a large difference in litter, including the feasibility of different initiatives to try to prevent litter at its source. So some of the things we're looking at in that respect is working with businesses to phase out unnecessary plastics in retail businesses by 2030, and looking to phase out single-use packaging in targeted CBDs and near beaches and waterways. I want to start that work in about a year and a half. So that's a long process and it's a journey, but we want to be working with businesses closely to get that right. We don't want to unnecessarily burden businesses. We need to be working together on it. We're also looking at, across both litter and waste prevention, smart technologies to deter litter and are open to any ideas in that respect. Advocating for producer responsibility to design out waste, educating and incentivising the community to reduce the amount of household waste that they create, and working more with our community volunteers and local litter campaigns, because so much great work is done in that respect. We want to make sure we can continue to promote that. In terms of our household collections of waste, we want to maximise the amount of materials that are recycled. And to do this, the research in the survey clearly showed that you need to make it easy. So what we want to do is to make it more convenient to get more items out of ending up in landfill and being diverted back for recycling as much as we can. So one of the things that I've got here on the screen, a couple of the things we're doing. A key focus there will be on electronic waste, textiles and household chemicals. We'll look at options over the next year and a half to see how we can provide more accessible services for those to be collected and recycled. We're looking at separate collections for targeted recyclable bulky goods. We've done a number of trials over the last few years, including mattresses and timber, to have those separately collected. We want to use the results of those trials and also identify upcoming new recycling processes to ensure that we can get more items recycled separately, whether that's at drop-off events or picked up from the curbside. We need to model that out, but we need to get moving on that, and we're going to be working with the community on that. And welcome to comments on how we might do that. We're also looking at improved options for improving offshore waste collections for the Pittwater region, so areas like Scotland Island and Mackerel Beach, and looking at how we can improve it. We've already instigated some good changes recently, but looking at what else we can do, and a more flexible bulky goods service over the coming years so that it works for everyone. And the last area I wanted to go through is smart development. This is about council taking the lead on waste reduction in buildings effectively, and the strategy has a section dedicated to this because we think it's extremely important. The vast majority of waste generated in New South Wales, I think over 50%, is construction waste. So we need to be minimising construction waste if we're going to reduce the amount of waste being generated in the first place. So, in a nutshell, the strategy includes improving circular economy principles in council's land use planning framework, That includes things like the local environment plan and development control plans, so that buildings and precincts can be designed for longevity, to enable disassembly and reuse of buildings, so that they're not being designed to be knocked down and just taken away and hopefully recycled. They're actually being designed so that they can be rebuilt. And where possible, to incorporate recycled and reusable materials. And council does have as an objective to maximise the uptake of infrastructure projects using recycled materials. So that's the summary of the strategy. There's plenty more I could talk about, but they're the key aspects of it that we'd like you to take away from this evening. In terms of the next steps, the community engagement is November to the 10th of December. So as I mentioned, we've already received a number of submissions, but look forward to a lot more. We'll be reviewing the feedback from December to February, and then taking it back to the council meeting approximately March. That's the aim. We'll see how it plays out early next year. But there are already quite a lot of submissions, so we'll just have to make sure we adequately address every submission as well. So I'm not sure if questions have come through, but I might. I'll just give me 1 second. I might stop sharing. Okay. Okay. So I don't think we've received any specific questions yet, but a number of good suggestions. So, for example, looking at tool libraries, repair cafes, car boot sales. Can I suggest that you, so if there are questions or well, particularly suggestions, that you put that in your say, because then we can work through that. I think I just got a question come through. So it's quite a lot. Yeah. So in terms of looking at clothing repair opportunities, yes, that's something we'd be looking at, and I'm glad to see a suggestion there. So we'll look into that, and we'll also, in terms of curbside pickers, that is a more complex issue, but I think that's probably something to put into your say comment as well, because we can consider that in the overall scheme of how the bulky goods system works. There are some issues with safety and amenity of the streets by leaving the waste out for an extended period, and that's one of the reasons it was changed. Another question: how are we going compared to other councils in Sydney? Generally, we're going, in terms of our recycling rate, and landfill diversion rate as well, we're going quite well compared to other councils. But this strategy is supposed to kickstart us into that circular economy space more, the reuse and repair, which we have made a good start in. We're doing reuse events and drop-offs, but we're trying to go to the next level. So that's where there's one or two inner west councils that do that. So in the inner west region that do that currently, and so we want to catch up to them and go past them. Okay. Are there any other questions? A question regarding dog waste. That's that's there's some hygiene issues. There's issues with dog waste being composted. The EPA has effectively banned it, the Environment Protection Authority. So that's a bit of an issue. But I see what you mean in terms of not being addressed in the strategy. So again, I'm happy for you to make a submission in that front. We do have compostable dog waste liners for when people are walking their dogs. But if it's being banned by the EPA, it makes it difficult for us to take much action for recycling, unfortunately. And in terms of a circular economy panel, we don't have one at the moment necessarily. We have some internal working groups, but that may be something that we develop over the next year or so. And in terms of, there's a few questions about leading the way, and have we found anywhere that is doing things very well here or overseas that we could copy? I wouldn't say there's any perfect council. We certainly looked at a range of different strategies and councils to sort of see what other councils are doing. It is a difficult space. It's quite challenging to make big changes, so you need to really have the investment and the time in it and the appropriate resources. There are some, in terms of the reuse and circular economy area, some in Canada and some Californian cities have some, and sort of West Coast cities in the US have some good approaches. And that's all we're sort of looking at what we can there and seeing how it might help us. Okay. Yeah. So I think there's a question about the business model I can't really address on this forum. Okay. That working group as well. Okay, I think that's, unless I've missed a question there, which I don't think I have. I think I've covered those questions, so I hope that's helped provide some guidance on these issues. So we might wrap up there. So thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure to speak to so many people committed in this space. Your feedback on the strategies is valuable, and you can share your thoughts through the survey link provided in your registration email for the webinar, located at the Have Your Say page under Have We Got It Right. Your input, whether brief or detailed, is greatly appreciated. This is your chance to share suggestions, ideas, or show support for any direction. So thank you once again, greatly appreciated, and good night.